It's always been a dream of mine to cut down trees, saw them into lumber on my own sawmill, and then build something with that lumber. So how does reality compare to this dream? Well, let's take a look at the past year and a half of owning a small electric sawmill. The installation, the usage, how much it can produce, is it worth it, and a little bit about this specific model, an electric Woodland Mills HM126. At first, I didn't think putting it together would make for an interesting video, until it got hard. So that's where we start. The first part is very easy, just bolt it together loosely. Then you have to set up the rails so that they are perfectly straight, parallel, level, butted up to each other and what have you. Tying a string from one stop to the other worked wonders for me to get it straight, and getting them parallel is as easy as looking closely over the bunks. You can see here that the far end doesn't line up perfectly with the first bunk here. This process took way longer than I expected. I thought, well, 2 hours, maybe 3? But if I remember correctly, it took about a day, and it still wasn't perfect. I guess that's partly because we're putting it on pretty uneven ground. If you have a concrete slab, you'll have a much easier time. Let's move on to the sawmill carriage. This sawmill comes with 2 booklets. There's one booklet that looks like an IKEA diagram, and there's another that actually explains the right order of operations and the reasons behind it, and I can recommend using the second one for reasons that will become apparent. One of the hardest things in building this sawmill is getting it on the rails. Ideally, you have a forklift that can drive where you're building it, because it's basically the weight of a piano. We have a small tractor with a front loader, so you'd think easy, but not only was it just barely strong enough, there's also another problem. The valves that control the front loader can only go up or down at full speed. There's no force sensitivity, and we can't just slam it down on the rails, of course. So what we did was as follows. The saw hangs from a couple of steel wires within the carriage to determine the height. So we used these wires in the other direction to hang it from the front loader, so we could let it down slowly by itself. And that kind of works, but now it's tilted backwards and our front loader can't reach any higher, so we had to build a little ramp to get the back wheels on the rails. From the start, we would have left all the bolts just hand tight, so that now if it's on straight rails, it wouldn't wobble. But alas, I had to loosen everything and then tighten it again. We managed to get the rails level and parallel, but the bunks were not squared up. Luckily, that's an easy fix with a ratchet strap on the diagonal. Of course, we pulled it too far and we had to use a ratchet strap on the other diagonal as well, but still, it's a relatively easy fix.
Yeah.
Here I'm checking if the saw is level with the bunks, and straight out of the box it's not, but that's why there are adjustment screws to tighten the cables independently from each other, and voila, a finished sawmill. We also need to get 3-phase power here, of course. For now, we'll run a temporary connection from one of the existing buildings until we get our own municipal connection when we're actually building our own thing here. It's just a little under 100 meters in total, of which the first 30 is through a small pipe. As a fun side note, our electrician friend told us we needed wire that has a cross-section of 4 square millimeters per core. But when we measured our cable, it came out to something like 3.5. Quite a difference. It turns out that the size that's on the packaging is nominal size, which accounts for different purities of copper. So modern copper cable is often thinner than what's written on the package because it uses higher purity copper than they did back in the day, so they are more conductive and can be made smaller. Anyway, first we tried to push it through, but of course that didn't work for 30 meters, so let's try to pull it through. First we need to suck a string through the pipe with a vacuum cleaner. My dad first tries to listen which of the 2 possible pipes is the one we use. That doesn't work, so then he blows on them to see which one is still capped on the other side and which one is open. I later learned you can just use a plastic bag to suck a string through a pipe, but I took the time to make a nice foam ball. We taped the vacuum cleaner to one end, and here I am putting the foam ball into the other side. This worked way better than I expected, and it seems like we had exactly enough string.
I wonder if he has it already. Pap, het touw is op! Het touw is op! Het touw is op!
Maar het gaat wel dus.
Maar heb je hem nog niet?
Nee?
My dad didn't think the string made it, but when we actually took a look, it was in fact there.
Ja,
Hey. Oh, man.
Oh, hij heeft al. Oh, lachen zeg hé. Oké.
With the string we pulled through some thicker rope, we had to splice it back into itself instead of using a knot, because that wouldn't fit into the pipe. Some PTFE spray for extra lubrication, Mom helps with unwinding the cable, and success!
Yep.
A couple loop-de-loops at the connection point, some materials for a post outside, screw it together,
Moment of truth. Yes.
While I was putting in this post, I realized that it's Steam Weekend. Every year at the end of summer, the local steam train organization has a weekend in which all things steam power are celebrated. From the original big trains to model trains to tractors, everything you could imagine. And why am I telling you this? Well, look at what I saw this year that I had never seen before. A steam-powered sawmill. What an incredible coincidence. I could do a whole video about this marvel from back in the day. For example, the saw has to go back and forth because the steel that can bend around in a circle has not been invented yet. They need all this with an insane amount of complexity in order to be half as fast as our little electric sawmill. I mean, it probably has some advantages over my machine here and there, but in general, we have really come a long way. Anyway, where were we? Testing our sawmill. Tension on the blade. See if it tracks correctly by rotating it by hand a couple turns. And
Gaat de verkeerde kant op.
goes in the wrong direction. Apparently, there's a bunch of different standards for which phase should go where, but we couldn't figure it out, so we just switched two around at random, and now it runs in the right direction. The first proper project we did was a gate, cutting some logs into beams, making some connections and putting it into place. I made a full build series about this if you're interested. Eventually we'll be making an enormous building with some workspaces and shared living quarters, and it'll take about 120 cubic meters of lumber. So we need to calculate how long that would take us, because if possible, we'd love to saw all the wood ourselves.
Alright, it's 9 AM. Let's do one full day of sawing.
Let's see how much we can saw in one full day. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about owning the sawmill. First, in general. Should you get a sawmill? Well, it feels amazing, truly magical to make your own lumber. You start with a beautiful tree, something that you associate with nature, and that's not very useful for making things. And then you have boards and beams, which is the stuff you make houses from, and tables and everything. It's the most used building material ever. So satisfying, big beam. And you just make that transformation. Just a sublime feeling, and the freedom to make whatever you want. It's amazing. Whether it's worth it monetarily is a different question.
Alright, first log done. We have 6 good boards, 3 boards with bugs, 1 wheelbarrow of sawdust, and 3 boards that need the sides cut off. And this first log took us about 1.5 hours. So let's see what the second does.
The answer is basically if you can get logs for free and you have enough time and you'll be building quite a lot but not too much, then the answer is yes. Otherwise, it's probably not worth it.
The first oak log did 7 good boards and 1 bad board, and we did it in half an hour, which was very nice.
With such a small machine like this, where you have to rotate a log manually, it takes quite some time to get through one log. Your advantage is that you don't have to transport the logs back and forth, and that you don't have to pay taxes on the work that you do for yourself. And the transport and the tax advantages have to weigh up against the extra time it costs you to saw a log, at least if you look at it purely from a monetary perspective.
Check to see if it stays on, and in the middle, it seems to do so. Yeah.
And how long does it take to saw a log, I hear you ask? Well, that depends on the log, of course. On this full day, the first log took 1.5 hours with setup and everything. The second or third log took just half an hour, and I believe we did 5 or 6 logs in the whole day. But these were logs that were the maximum width, so we are better off looking at the amount of volume we produced. And after one full day with a team of 2, we made, drumroll please, almost exactly 1 cubic meter. 1 trailer full.
Almost exactly 1 cubic meter of wood. Now, this is way too heavy because the field is muddy. So I have the car, then the chain, and then the mini tractor. Yes.
So if we would saw all the wood for our workplace house build thingy, we would spend 120 days sawing, which would simply be too many days. I mean, I'd love to do it, but we don't do this completely full time, right? So it would basically add a year to the build, if not more. So I think we'll end up sawing just the stuff where we can point at, like the board and bed and siding. So we can say, look, we made that from scratch, which is the primary reason to get a sawmill, of course.
Kapow! 1 day's work from there.
From here?
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
So, what's it like to own this specific machine? Well, electric is awesome. You can't move it very well because you need 3-phase power, of course, but I don't want to change location. And I just love that it's so silent when you're actually sawing. And when you stop, there's not actually a motor that will continue to run. I think that's great. The build is pretty sturdy and it's also powerful enough to get through the maximum width of an oak log. It's not that fast if you do that, but it works, which is the important part. One funny detail about this machine is that the hour meter works on vibration, and I believe the electromotor doesn't vibrate hard enough, so it's still on 0. I am very happy with the machine, and the company seems to be trying their best to make a good product. They are not cheaping out on material that's too flimsy or the wrong type or anything like that. And there are no sensors that can trip and no screens and other irreparable crap. It's really quite a simple machine, and I expect it's pretty easy to repair if I ever need to. I hope to see you in the next video.